Hi there, welcome to No Nonsense Whisky. My name's VMPF, and on today's episode we've got a Sample Saturday episode. Now, I haven't been doing these very often recently. It's been kind of tough for me to record these videos, but I've got one today that I think is very interesting indeed. Now, if you watch my videos, generally speaking, you'll know I do short form reviews, and these Sample Saturday videos are intended to be a bit more long form, a little bit more in depth, to cover a couple of different whiskies very quickly. In this case, we've got something very interesting indeed. Now, you might have seen some other channels have been exploring kind of ultrasound whiskies. The idea behind this is that you can take a whiskey, and everyone knows you can kind of put like staves and oak chips in it or whatnot to kind of get some kind of weird accelerated aging. Some people have been taking this idea and putting whiskey or new make into an ultrasound bath, turning it on with some chips in it and coming back a few hours later or whatnot. It's a good idea. It's an interesting idea. The idea is to agitate the liquid in and out of the staves, the chips, very quickly and just create some new colorization. Now, although it's an idea that I find interesting itself, it's something that I haven't really explored until a company called EtOH got in touch with me. These guys are based out in Copenhagen. A gentleman called Aleksander got in touch with me and his boss Tobias. And they've sort of said to me, do you want to try some of the samples of things that we're making? Because what they're doing, and I'm going to kind of talk about this on a very bog standard, low skill knowledge basis, they've created their own machine that will not only ultrasound whiskey, it will accelerate age, because they're also trying to replicate things like the temperature and the oxidization and some of the different chemical changes to esterification and things like that. Now, what I've done this time round, because I'm no expert in this, I got in touch back with these guys and I said, let's have a conversation on Skype or whatnot and explain it to us a bit better. So what they've done is they were on the phone to me for about an hour. We've got a full presentation. I'm going to nip into a quick 10-minute truncated version of that like directly after I finish talking now. So if you're interested in how this process works, stick around for that. I'm going to come back after that and taste this through these samples and see what we've got. And then, if you're really interested in that sort of thing, check out my channel straight after this, because I'm going to release the full version of our conversation with a couple of little chops in there as well. So if you're really interested in the whole conversation, make sure you go and check out the rest of my channel. In any case, I'll see you in about 10 minutes time and we'll go through these whiskies.
So EtOH Spirits is a company that I founded 3 years ago. I wanted to create a whiskey or spirit company, and therefore I chose the shortest name possible, being EtOH, being the chemical abbreviation for ethanol, for spirit. And it is a name that should signal that we're not trying to adhere to any romantic or geographic placement. So like there's no glens, loch, monasteries, churches, anything, castles, cities. This is just us, and we make spirit. I have a background as food science engineering. So engineer just like you, but maybe a bit more soft engineering, more about chemistry and not so much about machinery and stuff. I have a degree as a master brewer and used to run brewery. So it was the obvious choice for me to pursue something that was maybe a bit more, what do I say? Maybe I got a bit bored with making beer and I wanted to take beer to the next level, which for me is whiskey. It's just more complex, it's just more aesthetic in whiskey than beer. I still enjoy beer, but I think whiskey might be a bit more exciting for me. I didn't want to wait 10-12 years from my beginnings until I had something I was satisfied with. So I want to design the process, I want to design the product that we are creating, instead of just playing the waiting game and see how something turns out.
From the beginning, the goal was to create fast spirit, and I think the idea was to do it in around 2 weeks. And that's what we try to keep on. That's, if I would have to say which parameters are the most important which we use, it's definitely the temperature, ultrasound, and the oxygenation. And we actually already created 4 different products with different degree of ultrasound added, different aging time, and some of them even had some peaches in. That's some shout out to Donald Trump living now.
The initial ideas behind our first releases is to prove that we can make classic whiskies. In the first one, Endeavour is aged on sherry. Bonaparte is with a French inspiration in terms of French fortified wine and brandy. And Call of Excise Duty is focusing on port cask.
So maybe you've seen some videos on YouTube while they checking this ultrasound extraction and how to make whiskey faster, but they all do it in this commercial cleaning ultrasound bath. So our ultrasound route is a bit different than that. First of all, our power in the ultrasound is 10 to 20 times higher, and also the focus area is totally different. We have our design casket, which we just put into the road, and our focus area is around 500 mils. So this high energy is just straight pump into this casket filled with chips that provides extreme extraction of wood flavors. Also, the whole system works in this enhanced temperature. That's mostly because at the higher temperature, the reactions goes faster. Plus, there are many scientific papers which shows that the process of esterification and trans-esterification is the most efficient at this temperature. And of course, for us, this fruity flavor of esters is the most important. So in general, it's like many things applied in one instrument.
And I think what we try to do is combine them all in real time. And I think it's more difficult to control temperature and ultrasound rotation and oxygen all at the same point. But I think we make a product that is closer or with a higher degree of control than compared to other whiskies.
And of course, the extraction is not everything. If we're just gonna extract acids from wood, it's not gonna taste nice. So we have to transform them into esters.
The machine is I call it a reactor because you have rods of wood that you put into something. So for me, that is a reactor. I basically built it together with my dad and a smith who did all the welding. So we humbly named it the Jensen reactor because that's my surname and my dad's name. He's a retired engineer, so it was a fun project for him as he's no longer working. And I enjoyed being together with him. So we basically had this idea that, well, this might illustrate a bit more if we put on the pictures. We have a reactor on the left in which we put whole barrel staves from disassembled, freshly emptied barrels, sherry, port, bourbon, red wine, whatever we can get hold of, what we think is interesting. And it's circulating constantly through all these sensors and loops through this filter that you see on the right. And inside the filter is the rod of the ultrasound machine that generates these sound waves to affect the liquid. And in that filter area, we also work with either special proprietary chips, oak chips, or we make our own home toasted pieces of barrels that we cut up and run with our own toasting program. So we play around with whether you want more oakiness or more like spirit, like bouquet from a wine. So whether we work with, because working with chips is like working with a bourbon barrel. It's new oak that's either been charred or toasted. So it gives the same benefits as using a new barrel, whereas using used barrels gives typically more balanced flavor and also give that inherent flavor of what was stored in the cask. So we play around with the different ratios of barrels and chips and what kind of chips, and we can also, which I think is a great thing, we mix the barrels. Like we're not bound to having to start with one cask because we basically build the cask composition. So we can have a mix of, say, brandy and sherry in one batch. We don't need to like store it 2 times because we need to be double barrel aged. We can just make it all in one process. We have a problem that we always get the question like, why do we accelerate? For me, it's you, Aleksander.
No. Yeah, it's just like nothing's wrong with whiskey. Why would you accelerate it?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, but we would not be able to do it traditional way, as you mentioned before. Like it's just not sustainable for such a small company. And yeah, we definitely can react to certain situation on the market. We can just create whatever we want from the beginning. We can adjust during the process. And especially for me, working with ultrasound, it's like we can extract flavors which are not extractable other way. That's mostly what our instrument ultrasound, which we got, is used for homogenization and extraction.
For me, the point I wish to get through with is that we created the whiskies. So instead of people playing the waiting game, we made this whiskey to taste how we wanted it, and for that we needed control. There are critics who will say that, well, isn't it just cheap? And is it? I mean, yeah, you could say that I pay less rent in terms of storage warehousing for all the barrels, but I think you consider the time, like the amount of time and energy we put into this, and the research and the working with the machine justifies that we are just as much a whiskey with a reasonable price tag compared to somebody who just has a huge warehouse running at high efficiencies and just doing that. So for me, it's I feel more at home doing this than to have a classical distillery.
Okay, welcome back to the studio. Thanks to Tobias and Aleksander for talking me through all of the stuff that goes on with this. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I've got a full extended version of that phone call coming out on the channel soon, so make sure you check out that as well, because it was a really interesting conversation and they're doing some really good stuff. What we're going to talk about now is the actual whiskies themselves. So I should say, they do say this is not whiskey because this isn't whiskey. You know, this is accelerated aged new make spirit. And it's meant to replicate a style of Scotch that we used to, with different wood types and things like that. On the table then today we've got what they call a new make spirit, although as you probably saw in the snippets, it's actually a 1 year aged spirit. We've got the accelerated aged version of that, which has been aged in their reactor for 12 days. And then on top of that, we've got a different expression of theirs that's been aged for 7 days, but it's been based on a 3-year-old malt. So I guess technically speaking, this could be a whiskey at the time. I don't know what it would be classed at outside of the reactor. So let's talk about the first one then, the Endeavour. Now this sort of information will be in the extended version. I think I cut it out of the one you just watched. The information they give on here is really incredible. So this is just their front screen, and then this is the back. Here you can see things like what they used for the distillate, what staves they used, some awesome chemistry stuff that I don't fully understand, along with their temperatures and their catalysts and whatnot. Really cool stuff. But the cool thing is, if I show you this is the what they're calling a new make spirit. So it's actually a 1 year blended malt, and then here is their post-reactor colorization. There you go. There's the two together. So just a reminder, this right here is this liquid after 12 days in a reactor, which is pretty cool. So let's taste through that and see what we've got. So this isn't going to be surprising at all. This is what they call their new make spirit. 62.1%. And it's what we expect from New Mexico. I mean, obviously, we're not getting a kind of distillery characteristic from this because it's a blended. You know, this could be all sorts of stuff going on here. Now I'm going to leave this on the palate. I'm not going to cleanse in between the two because I want that to cancel each other out so I can see the differences. Let's check out what we've got. Now, obviously this has been reduced down to 46%. And for me, the difference is astounding. Obviously no oaky elements to this at all. Very floral, very creamy actually. This one here, you're getting some winey notes to it. It's a kind of mixture of Burgundy, brandy and some Oloroso, but I don't get too many of those sherry notes there, which is good because I'm not a huge fan of overly sherried whiskies. But the key thing is it doesn't smell youthful. You know, I mean, obviously you're not getting a kind of 20-year-old whiskey out of this. I'm sure they could probably do that if they extended this out to a month or so, but some of the indicative smells of a youthful whiskey would be things like hay or that kind of maltiness in the air that you sometimes get when you go to a distillery. Not really getting that off this, which is really cool. Let's try on the palate. Oh, it's got a really nice mouthfeel. It's hot as well, you know, it's quite heaty. For a 46%, I would think it would be higher. Getting some of those Oloroso notes to it. It's very oaky, very tannic, but not overly so. You know, we're not talking in the kind of realms of like your bourbons and things like that. Actually really tasty. I have to say on the palate, getting a few more of those hay-like notes coming out to it. But the cool thing is, we're also getting some kind of almost citric notes on the back end, some kind of lemony notes, which is really interesting. Very interesting indeed. Now, the other one we're going to talk about is the Bonaparte. That's the front label. I quite like their label designs. And this one here is got a 3-year-old malted barley in it. I'll leave it up there for just a sec. But it's also a slightly different wood makeup, which is cool. They've gone a bit of like a number 1 on the peat intensity, but 3 on the craziness factor. So let's see what this one has got involved in it. So this one's only a 7-day age. I haven't got a sample of the original distillate for this, so I can't do any comparisons, but let's see what we've got. Ooh. Very interesting indeed. Now, this one's obviously a 42%er, so it should be a bit more relaxed, let's say. And it certainly is that. For me, the oakiness has kind of disappeared a little bit. And I'm getting more of those winey notes, I guess, from the Burgundy brandy. Really nice. It's got more of those kind of creamy citric acid notes coming through of it, which is nice. Not quite lemony this time though, more on the orangey side. But as you know, I can get my nose right in this. That's good for the old low ABVs. Let's try on the palate and see what we've got. Really nice mouthfeel. I need to have a little. This is my real first sip of these, so. Okay, so more of those kind of tannic elements coming through. Again, the ABV, I would pick this much higher than it is. It's got a real nice spiciness to it. I mean, I'm kind of speechless, to be honest. It's really good. I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it is. It's like, I wouldn't want to go, I mean, it's not like, it doesn't diverge too far from a classic Scotch almost. It tastes like a higher ABV, younger Scotch, but at 42% and only a couple of days in a reactor. That's what's really astounding about this. I wonder what they could produce if they stuck it in there for a really long period of time. I think it would be very over oaked if it went too far. But what they've created here is really quite clever, and that's what I want to impress on you guys. Now, it's tough to get hold of this stuff because obviously they're in Copenhagen now. If you're on the continent, you probably get it a lot easier than what I can now. Unfortunately, 2021, the rules have changed significantly, and we've got a lot of issues around getting hold of stuff like this from the continent. Unfortunately, not very happy about that. Let's be honest about it, but that's a problem for another day. I think these guys are definitely worth investigating. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, and you're on the continent, I think probably my US fans, if you're watching this, you're probably not going to stand a chance of getting this whatsoever. But unfortunately, it is what it is. Yeah, definitely go and check these guys out because what they're producing is really, really fascinating. It's taking the concept of what we know as ultrasound whiskey to a whole nother level and really trying to replicate all of the chemistry and scientific stuff that goes on in a cask over so many years into a glass, and I'm really impressed with these samples here. I'm going to try and get these to some more people that I know so they can try them as well. But yeah, if you've enjoyed this video, it's been a bit of a different one, a bit of a longer one, let me know. If you want to see more stuff like this where we kind of dive into some interesting different subjects, then please do let me know in the comments below, and make sure you go and check out EtOH.